Hey guys, welcome back to the Outfitter Connection podcast. This week we have on two really good friends of mine that they just got back from Africa. Their trips kind of overlapped, and we figured this was a really good time to get them both on to both share their experiences over there and kind of debunk some of the myths, talk about their experiences and what to expect if you are looking for an African safari, and maybe what to look for when you're choosing a outfitter over in Africa because there's a lot of people and some are really really great and some not so much. So Felicia, Adam, how are you guys doing this afternoon?
Great.
I'm good.
Awesome. It's exciting to have both of you on at the same time, and it's really fun just to kind of podcast with some friends, and especially two out of the three of us have been to Africa multiple times. I've never been, want to go really badly. And so just kind of started off with some experiences and some stories and roll into the rest of it and see where the conversation goes.
Sounds good.
Perfect. So Adam, you had a really big 14-day experience over there with
Yep.
Rhino Land Safaris, and you were after some really awesome animals and things that really needed some management. Like we talked about last time you were on, how important it is for conservation efforts over there.
Yeah, the biggest one was probably the hippo. We were up further north, closer to the Kruger National Park, South Africa, Botswana border, and they had a bull hippo that had been causing some issues, and not only that, but it had killed a couple calves and hurt some cows, hippos that were in the area, and they just were trying to manage their small herd that they have. I was lucky enough to be in contact with them, and we were able to have a permit for the hippo, and so we went up there, and we were able to be. It took 3 days, but we were able to be successful. And the greatest part about it is once we were able to get the hippo out of the water and get everything, the neighboring, not necessarily a village, but the neighboring community, the men came over. There's about 12 of them, and they helped butcher and skin the elephant, the hippo, right there on the bank of the river, and be able to feed basically 250 people.
That's incredible. Like the amount of people that a hippo can feed. They're not a small animal by any stretch of the
Oh,
imagination,
heavens!
and all the meat over there does go to these villages, schools, nursing homes,
And I
things like
mean,
that.
it supplies need for the entire community. Um, Luckily enough for me, like we were able to take a small fillet, which obviously on a hippo, a small fillet is 8 inches wide and 3 feet long. But I was able to eat some. Felicia, while their group was there, they were able to have some steaks off of it and some food off of it. And the little bit that I was able to have, it was probably some of the best meat that I've ever eaten.
Yeah, you
That's what Felicia was saying. She was saying, she was sending me
are
pictures of the dinners and stuff you guys were having, and she sent me a picture of that hippo, and I was like, man, that is like way different than what I thought it would look like. Felicia, what
Um,
was your thoughts on that hippo?
Adam funded our hunt with some really great meals. We ate hippo, I think, 3 different nights. We had it as an appetizer one of the days when Adam was still there. Not at all what I was anticipating hippo to taste like. Like they're an aquatic animal for the most part. They do range on land, especially in the evenings, but being a herbivore, like I don't know, I just didn't expect it. And I guess it does fall in line with like cattle, but it was probably one of the, like, for someone who's never eaten wild game, take the best beefsteak you've had and put that on steroids because it put every piece of cow I've ever had to shame.
yeah, I mean, I have some friends that run Wagyu beef, and I've had some A5, like being in Vegas and things like that, some $250 steak meals, and that hippo meal was by far, obviously it goes back to the chef, right? It goes back to how it's prepared and how it's cooked and the proper way of doing it. But then again, for me, like obviously it probably would taste different because I'm gonna cook it different. But with having Eddie there, professional chef, cooking it up, it was better than some of the major big steakhouses that I've eaten at, like in Vegas and New York and things like that.
It doesn't help when Eddie can make your shoe taste good.
That's exactly right.
That's awesome. And it's, you know, it's one of those things that like I really want to experience, like the culinary, the hunting, you know, just the sights, because where I live, it is a miniature Africa, but it still doesn't compare. You know, talking with
No,
both of you guys, you know, it's both of you guys have hunted Texas several times.
well, dude, it's all based off the people that with the exotics that are in Texas and everything. It's all what's the word I'm looking for? It's like convenience. For a lot of people to go hunt these animals in Texas, it's all based off of convenience. Oh yeah, it's more convenient for me to drive an hour rather than being on a flight for 18 hours, you know, travel 30 hours to go do these same animals. It's all based off of convenience.
You're just gonna pay for that convenience.
That's exactly, that convenience comes with a price tag.
Oh, it absolutely does. And that's something Felicia and I have talked about quite a bit, is you can take, you know, an Impala over in Africa is what, 400 or 500 bucks?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're going to spend 4 or 5,000 stateside.
Oh, if not more, if not double that.
I mean, I
Right.
compared it just for a client recently where it was for them to come shoot an Impala was $395, right? But you still have your lodging, you still have your flight, you have all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So like in Texas, it was $4,500 for an Impala. Okay, so if you're gonna go to Africa and you're just gonna do an Impala, you might as well have done it in Texas. But the upside is when you want to go to a place like Africa, you can go shoot 6, 7 animals for the price of what you'd go hunt 1 or 2 animals in Texas for. So just the relevance there of the cost, it's a lot of people, and like with Africa, a lot of people look down on it with, oh, it's trophy hunting. There's nothing wrong with trophy hunting. You're taking the most mature animals and all of that meat is being utilized. More power to it.
Absolutely. Well, I remember it probably been a while ago, but Felicia, I remember you showing me some pictures of you had a client over there in Texas where they went and did like a sable. They did like a what is that, the Nile Lechwe. They did a bongo, whatever. And I think we were on the phone. I think we added up. It was like $160,000. And it's like, dude, it's like yeah, you could have gone to Tanzania for that and done a full bag shooting an elephant, a lion, everything. For
Yeah,
that
awesome
money.
for that one. That was one of Chris's taxidermy shop clients that brought in, oh gosh, Austin, a sable. It was a sable, a kudu, a Niala, an Impala, a Rowan. I'm sure there was something else in there that a bongo.
Yeah.
A blessed buck.
That was it a blessed buck?
Yeah, I just remember talking with you guys, and it was like I mean, the client was, I mean, pushing 140, 160 grand, and it was like for like 8 animals, and I'm like, dude, you could have went and shot 25 animals in Tanzania on a full bag hunt and still had some money left over. And I'm like, and that's where it comes to me, is like the necessity. Okay, yeah, is it easy for me to go over to Texas and shoot an Axis or shoot an Addicts or whatever? Absolutely. I'm on the set point of like some of these exotics that I want to go after and that I have a desire for. I want to try to go where they originate from, so then you can see the culture, you can see the true environment that they lived in. Granted, I mean, between me and Felicia, we know there's several places over in South Africa, even on Rhino Land, where it looks a lot like South Texas. But that's the reason why these exotics flourish so well in this southern environment, in the southern states.
Perfect example is Austin's Aoudad. You know, running that Wicked 7 outdoors, chasing Aoudad. They originated in North Africa. But their populations boom in Texas because it's a baby Africa. That's what, they're living in the same environment. It's just the culture, the cuisine, everything that you get to experience along the way in that natural environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the aoudad here, they're in very much similar environment as what they are along the Barbary
yeah.
Coast in Africa. I mean,
Yep,
it's almost identical.
when you're over there in Morocco and northern Africa, just basically the only thing that splits them is the Mediterranean Sea between Morocco and Spain. And over there, it's high, tall grass, rocky mountains.
Yeah.
And you know, big cliffs. Same, you look at southern, you know, eastern side of New Mexico to Texas. It's the same type of environment, landscape. That's why, you know, these animals, I think, flourish so well.
Yep. So Adam, so your hippo, and then what was the next thing that you guys?
So we went, then we did a lion over in the Kalahari.
Okay.
And I did that with me and Marcel, who's my PH. It was a big fight because he wanted me to do it with my bow. And so I told him, I was like, okay, well, 2 attempts and then we'll take out the rifle. And so when we get over there, like Uncle Freddie, who's kind of the owner and things like that, he was like, well, I'll be honest with you, lion hunting is really, really boring with about 10% of excitement. So I'm like, okay. So we start looking for tracks and everything like that. It takes a while. Then we get into the lion. Well, that grass is like 4 feet tall. These guys are all 6'3" or above, and they could see it from like 40 yards away. And I'm like, I don't even see its tail. Like, I don't even know what you're looking at. So they kept scooting me in closer, scooting me in closer. Finally, at like 19 yards, I could barely see it, but I'm like, dude, this is a lion. Like, I'm not going any closer. Like, let's make the attempt now. And so we made the attempt, and I shot it and went down the face into her shoulder, and she took off. We tracked her again, and I was able to put another arrow in her, and she subsided. But like, because it is a lion, to be on the safe side, to where, you know, we had multiple people there, I ended up shooting her with my rifle 1 round just to make sure that like she was fully dead. Like, because the biggest thing that they said was a dead lion is what will kill you. And so before we even went up to it, we were like, we walked up pretty close to it and, you know, put it right behind the shoulder and shot her just to make sure that she was fully dead and capacitated and no one was going to get hurt trying to get into where the bush where she was at to try to get her out and to where we could see her, weigh her, take pictures. But it was definitely a rush, like 100%. Like that and the hippo was probably by far the most exhilarating like hunt I've ever been on. Because it went from really, really boring to you have about 5 seconds to shoot this animal.
Yeah. What is the significance of managing lionesses in Africa? Because I know there's a good number of them, and
it's like anything else. I mean, because in South Africa, yes, there is a breeding program for lions. South Africa has a breeding program for lions. That's why it's a lot cheaper to go over to South Africa and shoot them, because 1, they're not importable, and 2, they have a breeding program for this specific reason. It's not like you go over to Zambia or Tanzania to go shoot a lion. Over there, it's just like managing anything else. You have to manage the adult males the same way you have to manage the adult females. Are people more attracted to shooting that big line with that big mane where it goes clear down between their crotch? Absolutely. But in my status, to where it's like, 1, I'm not gonna, yes, I am trophy hunting, but I'm not just gonna pay the money for that lion just to go shoot a male because I can't import it. Granted, shooting a lion in South Africa doesn't count towards the Big 5 under the SCI guidelines due to the fact of the breeding program. but in my eyes, I'm still killing a lion. Like, to me, it's still going to count in my eyes and in my opinion. I'll make myself my own plaque for when I accomplish the big 5 and the dangerous 7.
Yeah.
But you still have to manage these animals the same way you do anything else.
Right, because populations explode, and it really does have a ecological impact. You know, if you've got more predators than you've got prey, your predators are eventually going to starve themselves out.
Well, and two, they're only, so like for me to go over there and hunt, they have to release that lion 90 days prior to whatever outfit you're going to. And there's only a few amount of outfitters that actually have the permits and the licensing to do the lion hunts. It's not like everyone can do it.
I got you.
Well, the other
go
thing
ahead,
too
Felicia.
is like explain your lioness, because she wasn't just a
And-
lioness.
right. Like, so the lioness that I shot, she'd been to 2 different compounds that people have tried to hunt. She was over 10 years old. Every one of her canines but one were busted off. They estimated her to be over 10. And so she'd been in other compounds prior to me even getting there over the last year and a half. And they just haven't been able to find her.
So she was becoming a little bit of a problem.
I wouldn't say a problem, but she was just like, people weren't getting it. Like, it all goes on to like the trackers and the outfit and things like that. And I'm not saying whatever outfit she was on previous, but like these guys that we went and hunted with at Kalahari Lion Safaris, like, it was unreal seeing the 2 trackers on the front of the truck on their little seats, and we were going like 5 miles an hour, and they were just looking for tracks to see where she crossed the road.
I got you.
And I was like, well, how do you tell the difference between a female and a male? And it's like, well, the track is bigger. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that track looks pretty big. And he goes, oh, that's the female. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's the female. And, you know, we're not dealing with like your normal mountain lion here in the States.
Right.
Like your average mountain lion here in the States, you know, a good Tom, you're 140, 160 pounds. My lioness was 380.
Good Lord.
So I took a picture just to, I mean, I'm not a large guy by any means, but I took a picture of her laying down, and her body was as long as me and her tail was as long as me. So she was over 10 feet tall from tip of nose to tip of tail. And I mean, and she was just a beast. And luckily enough that I was able to harvest another great trophy. And, you know, over there, that's one thing they don't do is, with a lion, they don't do anything, you know, they might use it for bait or whatever for like maybe night critters or something like that, but they won't eat the lion because it's considered like bad juju or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also won't let the skinners or the trackers or things like that have any part of the lion, because a lot of them believe in like black magic. And so they what's called Mumbai, which is like, to them, is like black magic. And so they'll try to do stuff with that lioness for like that black magic. And so it's, to me, and this is all just the 10 hours that I was there, this is all just like info that I'm getting, why we're trying to hunt this lion and why, when we were successful and taking our pictures and things like that. But I mean, there's nothing scarier than after I release that arrow and you hear that big growl from that lion. And it's like, I've watched enough YouTube videos where, man, she came running around the thorn bush and I was like, dude, she's coming right back at me. I was like, oh my gosh, here it comes. But I mean, she never did, but still, it was like that first instinct, like releasing that arrow, it was like, my heart just sank, because it was like, I hope these guys will shoot fast enough if she comes barreling around this corner here.
Especially
What's that?
Especially at 19 yards.
Yeah, you don't have a whole lot of time to draw another arrow and take your aim and things like that. But as soon as I released my arrow, I was back pulling another arrow out, trying to put it in my nock and getting ready again, because that lion was just, she was not a happy camper, and she definitely let it known after we shot her and when we were when we found her again, going up for the second shot. And then the second shot, we shot her at 12 yards.
So with her canines being worn down as far as they are, what kind of position does that put a lion in? Because they've got their giant claws, she can still take down animals, but they go for the throat on a lot of their prey.
It's dude, even with them worn down like they are, their bite pressure will still actually collapse that esophagus in that impala, blesbuck, springbuck, whatever. Mm-hmm. It'll still crush. That lioness, they said that 2 weeks prior to me getting there, she had already killed a wildebeest.
So she was still an active member of her prey.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I asked them, when the area that we were in, because they run the hunting section in blocks. So I asked them, and I said, well, in this block, how many lions do you have? Because I know this is all this is all kind of what this outfit is known for, is just lion hunting. Mm-hmm. And he says, well, I don't know. I think I got 4 more males in this block, and then we probably got another lioness and another male in another block. And I'm like, the whole time we never saw any other lion besides mine. Not saying that they weren't in there, or who knows, maybe we walked right past them.
Right.
But we didn't see them.
I could be wrong by this thought process, but I've spent a lot of times, out here in the Texas mountains, and I've only ever seen one mountain lion, confirmed, 100%, no questions asked, it was a lion.
Right.
I would assume that African lions are very much the same way. They don't want to be seen unless they're comfortable. They're in a position where they know, hey, if this hazard or this danger starts coming towards me, I can get away at a distance.
Well,
I would assume that the African lions are the same.
It was wild to see the mannerisms of her, because once we found her, I started whispering, hey, okay, now what's the plan now? And the guy goes, oh, nothing. He starts talking out loud. He goes, just talk normal. He goes, she's moving her ears. She's just getting used to us. She's not going to go anywhere. Huh. She's gonna stand her ground right there. And then also too, with a lion, when you could walk, we could have walked up 10 yards from her. Mm-hmm. But he goes, if you start moving around to try to move around her, she's going to face you. She's not going to give you a broadside shot. She's not going to let you walk around her.
Right.
She will face you straight on the whole entire time.
That's wild. And Felicia, you and I, last year, when your group of women came down, we had a mountain lion experience.
Yeah.
And
but I was gonna say, these apex predators, they're not going to be as scared of you as you think they would be. They're going to do their best to avoid you in most circumstances, like the mountain lions. But you piss off an apex predator, and that's going to be in your face before you know it.
Oh, I've being from Wyoming, I've had several encounters with bears and things like that. The first thing a grizzly bear will do 90% of the time will run away. But you always get that one will actually start coming towards you to see what it is, because he knows he knows he's the king. He knows there's nothing else out there unless it's a bigger bear that's going to push him away.
Right. So after your lion, and whenever people think about Africa, right, they're thinking giraffes, elephants, hippos, and lions. So what was the next thing that you guys were going after, Adam?
So after we flew back into Pretoria, because going over to the Kalahari, it was either drive for 16 hours or take a charter flight and go fly for an hour and a half. So we rented a charter flight and we flew over there. So we flew back, and then from there we went north again and went up by a place called, kind of owned by the same company, the same owner, It's called Buffalo Land, and that's where I went and shot my black giraffe.
So what's some of the myths surrounding black giraffes? Because everybody thinks that these black giraffes are some super rare, almost extinct animal, and that's just
No,
really not the case.
no, it's all based off DNA. So basically, the older they get, the darker they will get,
Mhm.
but not all of them will always go black. And it's not even saying that they're black; they're just really, really dark brown, and then I want to say their undercoat where the squares lay on top of that, their tan hide goes almost like a dark brown as well. So when they're in the shadow, they look completely black. Like 100% they look black.
I got you.
Um,
And like I equate this a lot to Disney, of course. Like the hunting community's gotten Disneyfied over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Where
right.
it's like it's a big taboo to like shoot a giraffe or shoot a zebra,
And
shoot a
and
lion.
right. And I'll say this because like honestly, like I told myself I was because yes, draft they're still in the same concept of like, and Felicia can back me up on this too, is like once again, even though they're a docile creature, that you still have to manage these animals because once they get to a certain point, these big mature bulls won't let any of the younger bulls come in to mate, and they'll kill them. But by this time, that old bull can't even produce offspring. So
Right.
it's not doing any good to the herd on these animals. And these giraffes, when they get into their big fight, a lot of times it's to the death. Like they will swing them heads so hard and it'll kill that other giraffe, or it'll swing its head and hit it and break its own neck and die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
actually, giraffes are one of my favorites to talk about because here in the United States, we have this super false perception of them being this docile creature that you shouldn't hunt them. But the reality of it is any ecosystem that's not balanced properly is
Right.
going to get overrun by a species. Like elephants are the prime example. But I love the conversation of a giraffe because what a lot of people don't realize is giraffes will overindulge, and it also will starve out animals that are territorial, such as like rhinos, that if you have too big of a family group, they're going to eat all the low hanging and high hanging vegetation, which is
Yes.
detrimental to any plains game. And everything needs management.
Yes.
Nobody hunts them. So like next year we have a trip in 25, and a giraffe was added to our list because their populations are booming and they're not managed well enough because so many people have this false perception to not hunt them.
Right. 100%. And to me, it's like I told myself, I was like, look, if I'm going to shoot a giraffe, I want it to be unique. I want it to be kind of the oddball where you don't see it. Because on a black giraffe, they're not necessarily rare, but then again, it takes a while for an old bull to reach that peak of becoming a black giraffe or having it in its DNA when it gets that old.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna do one giraffe, I want it to be an old massive bull and have it be as dark as it can be.
Yeah.
And we were able to find it, and he almost looked like a unicorn because the knob on his head was so large that it protruded like a unicorn horn. Like they almost classified it as another horn.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's something that maybe a lot of people don't understand is the fact that those larger animals, they still have to be managed.
Everything does. That's why I mean Felicia brought up a great point. It doesn't matter what in what ecosystem you're in. Whether it's predators or prey, if the animal is not being managed, it's, for instance, perfect example as Wyoming with the wolf issue.
Mhm.
We can't hunt them. There's only certain areas where we're allowed to shoot the wolf. Well, obviously wolves are super smart and they figured that out. So now they just stay in Yellowstone and they eat all the deer, elk, and moose.
Yep.
it's that same aspect. If these animals aren't managed and the conservation aspect is behind it, like once again shooting this giraffe with the township that we were in and the common village. I don't even want to call it say village, but little groups of people that are in that area. That's where 90% of all that giraffe meat went.
Yeah.
I was
Sorry.
Go ahead, guys.
The baboons. That's something that monkeys they're avoided because of their humanoid characteristics. However, what a lot of people don't realize too is like, okay, so a baboon's only natural predator is a leopard. But since they put in the power lines,
Yeah,
can't get to them. So their populations are booming. So when we were over there, I shot 3 baboons just for the point of the management, because those troops get so large and they're mean. Like they are nasty. You can smell them from a mile away. Like you start to roll into those baboons and you can smell them if you're downwind of them. And it's crazy to me that the troops have exploded just in the trips that I've been over there over the last few years. The populations of baboons have exploded.
Yeah, absolutely. While we were there, I think we saw probably 40 or 50 of them, all that different areas that I was hunting in.
Yeah.
Like and then like with the little vervet monkeys, they're everywhere. Yeah, it all comes down to management and conservation. Whether you're in Africa hunting or whether you're in, the United States hunting, you see a coyote, coyotes are very, very tricky and very good at taking the offspring fawns from deer and antelope.
Mhm.
And so to me, it's like, you call it smoke a pack a day. You shoot. That's right. You shoot one wolf and you save about 10 different fawns. In that first year. It's the same thing like with baboons and monkeys and even the jackals. It's the same concept. After shooting my giraffe, we went back to rhino land, and it was more towards the end. It was kind of like, okay, that my hunting's done. These were the main things that I was looking for. The biggest thing was going back to rhino land because before I left, I actually did have one of their management tags for their elephants. I was going to shoot one of their young bulls that was having some issues and causing some problems on the ranch. And the day I left, Marius, their dad, and even Michael and Marcel texted me and were like, "Hey, bad news. You're still coming, but the government took your tag away." And it was all due to the fact that it was like, for them, it's not like our game and fish where if you draw a tag, it's your tag, you can go shoot the animal. Over there, they can decide whether even if it's a depredation tag and it's non-importable, you're shooting it to manage your herd, but you have someone who's willing to pay the money to come shoot an elephant. It doesn't matter to the government. They're like, well, we don't want you to do that, and they can pull that tag anytime they want. So that was the hard part about the whole
idea.
Oh, it is. And the whole time I was there, the whole 14 days I was there, their dad was on the phone with someone in the government, kind of like their game and fish department every day. Mm-hmm. And he actually even went into town, which is like a 3-hour drive. He went into town to go fight to try to get the tag back, because it's like, well, you give me an opportunity to have 2 management tags this year, and now you took them away when I have a hunter in camp who's willing to help manage my herd for me.
Right.
And so it was, that, because my whole goal with this trip was to do 3 of the big 5, 3 of the dangerous 7 in one trip. We ended up doing just the hippo and the lion, which is perfectly fine with me. It would have been icing on the cake to do the elephant, but that's the thing, that sometimes just because you're going over there and you're like, oh, I'm going to hunt this animal, it doesn't always mean you're going to have the tag or the permit for that animal. It's like, Felicia, you guys did a few days of night hunting, correct?
Yeah, we did a honey badger, a genet, and a porcupine, bush buck. But as far as your CITES permits,
Yeah,
Ryan,
didn't Ryan do a what is that? A civet.
civet too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like like some of those animals prior to Ryan being there, besides the genet and the porcupine, the honey badger, the civet, and any other of the permits that they had applied for, those CITES permits have to be on site before you can even do any of those night critters.
Yes. Yeah, and like a lot of things too with that is like you have to pull that permit, pay for that permit, regardless whether you have an opportunity at that animal or not. So
Right.
we did like 5 or 6 nights of night hunting because we did a couple of blind sits.
Oh, cool.
And he did shoot a honey badger. Unfortunately, we didn't recover it, but talk about a moment in your life where you reconsider all of your decisions when you're tracking a wounded honey badger in the middle of the night with a leopard baying around you. Good gravy.
Yes. No, and that's that's part of it though. It's the same concept that like for me a few years ago, I did a gen ed. We had a permit for a civet, never saw one, never wasn't able to get one on bait. And then luckily enough, they had been applying for caracal permits, and the night I actually shot my caracal permit was the night they actually got the permit in through the mail for a caracal. And so it was kind of luck of the draw that they hadn't seen caracals on their property in probably over 8 years. They knew they had them, but it was like one of those things. Like all of a sudden we were driving around and there the two were. But yeah, in all this aspect, you see these guys, whether it's on YouTube and they're shooting stuff from bait and things like that. You have to go behind the scenes of realize like, okay, just because he's shooting it in Africa, yeah, there's a lot of kind of Wild West stuff that goes on over there as well. But 99% of the time, these guys that are doing that, they already have a permit, they already have everything in line, or else they wouldn't even be posting this or placing this up on YouTube or on their hunting channel because of that reason. They still go through like us. We make sure we have our licensing. We make sure we have all that type of stuff.
Which
Absolutely.
the porcupine that I did this year, that was a management. So that
Yeah.
was for the local farmer, a neighboring farmer for agriculture purposes had requested for us to come in and shoot some of the porcupines. So that's why that permit was there, is because they needed them managed, and it was pretty much like if you see them, shoot them, because there's
Right.
way.
Absolutely. It's the same thing. Like it would be considered like a landowner tag. Like in the Western states, we can get landowner tags for like deer and elk because of them eating indoor hayfields. So depending on how much property you own or how many acreage you have will depend on the amount of deer, antelope, or elk permits that you can get from the state. It's a lot similar like that down there. If you run any type of agriculture, it's easier for you to get CITES permits for porcupines and things like that can actually cause damage to your agricultural aspects. It's easier on that side to get some of these permits.
Absolutely. And not to deter anyone that wants to go to Africa, because your plains game, for the most part, are not there. That's not
There's
where
no
you're permit. You're going to see your primates, your predators, your big 5, dangerous 7. Like that's where you're going to start seeing your permit. And then anything that you're going to hunt at night, pretty much aside from plains game, like your bush buck is a night critter, but it's still considered a plains game. So those don't require any type of permit.
Correct.
But like fowl, I've done birds over in Africa. They're a permit. Monkeys are a permit. Your varmints and your predators, your hyenas, all that, they're going to require a
permit. Yeah. So when I did my permit for my hippo and for my lion, I signed 6 pieces of documentation to have that CITES permit.
Jeez.
So Felicia, when you were over there, were like, how was, I mean, obviously being kind of the owner of Women of the Wild and bringing people into like coming over to Africa and things like that. how is it, or how difficult is it, or is it on your kind of radar? Like, because both me and you know that we love going over there. Is there anything on the back part of your mind wondering, like, I hope they have the same experience as I do?
Always, that weight is always on your shoulder, whether it's a stateside event or something over there. It puts a little more skin in the game when you're going international, because you have to make sure that like the travel's up to par, that obviously the lodging and hospitality you're going to get from Rhinoland is never questionable. It's fantastic. I never worry about that, but an experience is always within perception, right? So I can't ever control someone's experience, no matter how much I cater to that. They
Right.
have to have a good experience. So that's one thing over the last, gosh, almost decade of doing what I do.
Right.
It's something I had to learn, that no matter what, as long as I did my best, they're going to
Right.
depend what their outcome is. And, you know, I've had people that went that had an awful, I don't want to say awful experience, but an awful perception of what Africa was supposed to, compared to what it really is. And that's
See, that's my main worry, is because it's like, I have a few guys that I work with that, you know, I talk about this enough that they're kind of, there's some interest now.
Yeah.
And now that I have some of my taxidermy that I've gotten back over the years and things like that, now they can actually see it, touch it, look at it, and see that, man, this is actually kind of, you shot this, wow, you know. And so it is kind of them coming over and seeing the taxidermy and things like that is kind of like a selling point. But that's the thing that I look at now, and it's like, that's my biggest concern, because I know I have a great time when I go over there. I know I have an awesome time when I go to Africa. Now it's like, what's the perception of, say I bring this individual over, what's the perception, how they're going to react?
So the first thing I tell people is, like, do not sit and watch shit on the Serengeti, the Kalahari, like Kruger National Park. Like, don't sit there and binge watch The Lion King. You're going to
Yeah.
perception of what it is. South Africa, specifically Lafali and Limpopo, where we're at, it's very dense. So a lot of people, when they think Africa, they're thinking the Serengeti. They're thinking and not like, yes, you can go hunt in places like that, but you're still probably going to be in a high fence. Most of South Africa is high fence.
High fence, yeah.
That a lot of people are expecting, like, to pull up into this savannah and see 500 animals and you get to pick the one you want. And in reality, you're hunting. So what I like to do is I like to show them your videos. I like to show them my past videos. I like to show Devin and Face video. So the people that have gone with Rhinoland, I try to showing them other resources, like other outfits. And it's not because I'm against like promoting another outfit or anything like that. Like, I believe in these boys and what they're doing. But if this is where you're going and this is the environment you're going to be in, I want you to see this hunt where it really is, because you could be in Namibia, you could be in Mozambique, and it's all going to be different. So providing like documentation that they can like go, I'll send them, like before our trip, I sent them your YouTube links. I sent them Devin and Face. I sent them mine. I sent them Cassie's, and I said, these are people who have hunted with Rhinoland. Johnny Utah. I grabbed all of those and I sent them to them, and I said, these were all done at Rhinoland. They should be building expectations off, not what Nat Geo.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You can't, because it's totally like, even like, I know my buddy Mackenzie has some awesome hunting videos, but a lot of his stuff is in Zambia, Tanzania, Mozambique. He has very few in South Africa, because a lot of his stuff was, he was on these 21-day hunts.
Right.
You know, he there's a lot he did over at Rhinoland safaris and things like that. Prior to what it is now, like he was over there 20 years ago. You know, he was over there when Michael and them were both like 8 years old.
Right.
You know, and so it's definitely changed a whole bunch, but the hunting has not. The hunting is still the same. The property is still the same.
Something I kind of want to touch on a little bit. So people hear high fence, right? And they're like, oh my God, it's a high fence. Like I'm out, I'm out, I'm out. Explain the difference between a Texas high fence and an African high fence, because the reason they high fence is a completely different reason than what we high fence here.
Yeah, their government depicts that. So in South Africa, the landowner is responsible for the animals. So the way that I explain this, and Adam, feel free to chime in, but the way that I always explain this is like, if you owned property on, the left side of the road, and an animal, a kudu, runs out from the left side of the road and into the road, and someone hits it with their vehicle and they have a fatal car accident, that landowner is responsible.
Yes.
But on top of that, so that's why the government was basically sick of these accidents and being responsible for the animals. So it made the landowners responsible for those animals. But on the contrary to that too, it helps down with poaching and keeping your farm and your land safe, is to have those fences as well. And then like your big five, is it your big five, you have any of those, you have to have electricity on the fence. The fence has to be 9 foot tall.
No, so as long as you, unless you have, I don't know if it ties into the fact of, I know it's mainly lions, but I don't, it could be the big five. That I'm not 100% sure of. But with the lions, I know it has to be double walled, both sides have to be electric.
Yeah, and I know that if it's the big five, you have to have electricity.
Yes.
That and I think the regulation is a 9 foot fence. But like, you compare Texas to Africa, and I'm speaking for rhino land. They're just over 32, close to 33,000 acres fenced. Yeah. So you're not on some 500-600 acre high fence. You are hunting a very fair chase. Yes. Animals will elude you, and you may never see them again for the rest of their life. My kudu and my Nyala, from my very first year, are the perfect example. My Nyala, they told me they'd never even seen him. My kudu, they'd never even seen him prior to me shooting him, and they've lived there their whole lives.
Yep.
So it's not terrible. It's just the government, their way of.
Yeah. Well, and two, even like, so I've been to one other game farm with African Bow Hunting Adventure with Donnie Gill, and the area we own, because he doesn't necessarily own properties, he has permission to go hunt other concessions. Mm-hmm. And so when we went, it was still a 3,000 acre area, but because it's strictly bow hunting, we would just go from blind to blind to blind. It's not like we were out driving around. They would come drop us off in the morning at one blind. If we didn't see anything, he would call it in. We'd go have lunch, and then we would go to a different blind. If we didn't see anything within, 4 something hours, when we'd go have dinner and we'd sit for the evening, we'd go to a different blind. So in those 3,000 acres, when you're bow hunting, it's huge because you're only looking out at a 10 acre section, a 5 acre section, because that's where the blind is.
And it's crazy to think, like, so in Texas, whenever we high fence, it's to keep our stuff in, right? As well as other places in the world, but it's to keep our stuff in because we've paid exorbitant amounts of money for these animals. Yes. And it keeps, similar to Africa, right? It keeps the poaching down, because I know several instances of people driving around at night near high fences, and they're shooting things that are trapped down the highway between two high fences.
100%.
It's an unfortunate thing that happens, but it does happen. And I'm sure it's the similar situation over in Africa, but the landowners are held responsible for the animals, like Felicia was saying.
Yep.
So Adam, go ahead, Felicia. I'm sorry.
No, that's the entire point of the high fence is the government implements that for basically public safety. That's the point of a high fence in South Africa.
Yeah. And Felicia, you and I have talked a lot about the differences and the similarities between high fences in Africa versus Texas. And you've always said, like, Texas could learn a lot. A lot of these ranches could learn a lot from just going over to Africa for a week or 2 weeks and picking the brains of some of these ranches over in South Africa.
Oh yeah, 100% how they manage their animals, everything.
Yeah. And there's a few guys that I know
over in Texas just from being through work and things like that. He doesn't even have hunters come and hunt his property. He just likes seeing the exotics, and they end up dying of old age and disease anyway.
Mhm.
And I'm like, dude, you're paying this money. You might as well get some excess money out of it. He goes, I could care less about it. He goes, I don't need money. I do it because I enjoy seeing these exotics. And I'm like, to me, that's in a standpoint, to me, it's like, that's not being a conservationist then.
No, that's just being a collector.
Yeah, 100%.
Because
So-
the last thing, oh, go ahead, Felicia.
Sorry.
You're fine.
So the biggest thing, and like reverting back to that trophy hunting, you have to manage populations to let populations flourish, right? Like if somebody has mature animals past their breeding prime, they're going to push other males out. They're not going to let other breeding prime animals come in and breed those. So then you're going to lose out on a lot of young. You're going to add to the fighting and fatality of these animals, because the more dominant that male is, the more he's going to push out other males and not allow the breeding process. So
right.
and when you go, and it depends, right? Like all outfitters are different. There's some in Africa that don't have great management. There's some in Texas that have superb management. But when it becomes about the dollar, that's when it becomes the issue. There's nothing wrong with a trophy hunter, because what that trophy hunter is doing is they're taking the most prime or most beyond prime animal out of that herd to be able to let that herd grow and let everything around it flourish, whether that's the environment, whether it's the herd itself. But you're also going to prevent disease. You're going to prevent, you're
gonna let the actual herd flourish rather than diminish.
Yeah. So last year we were there. I did a post about it last year that we actually stumbled upon, and Adam, you may have seen it at Rhino Land. We stumbled upon an old male giraffe that had died. Bones, the whole carcass was still there, and in the African sun, it's a lot like Texas. It doesn't like rot, it like tans the hide from the sun. So the hide was, this giraffe had been there for a while, but the skin is still there intact. The bones are all there. And I did a post talking about why it is so important to hunt these types of animals to avoid things like this, because can you imagine how miserable a death, especially, okay, so look at your lion. She gets to a point where her canines and all her other teeth are completely worn down.
Yeah, and she can't eat.
Where she physically can't bring anything down. The pride is eventually going to push her out. She's not going to be able to take something down on her own. She's not going to be able to eat on her own, and she's going to have to basically raid hyenas and other predators of their harvest to try to eat something that she's going to have a difficult time doing with those teeth. But then you look at like giraffes, and you have disease, you have starvation, and you have predators. How awful do you think that would be to die of dehydration because you couldn't physically walk to the closest watering hole, which is miles away, that you couldn't, get to the food that you needed. So now you're starving, or you get taken down by, a pack of predators. And that's what these animals succumb to if you don't hunt them. But they're not there. Like, that's a false conception with it. You're not out there to decimate a population by any means. By out there hunting, you are actually aiding to any population. As like no hunter on this planet, unless you're a poacher, which is not a hunter, you are not to decimate a population. You are out there to promote that species and promote the growth of it. So
absolutely,
that's the misconception that I feel that we always fall upon, is that it should be like taboo, like it's taboo to hunt in Africa, and it's frowned upon because it's African plains game. And here in the United States, I hear it, as being an owner of a women's company, we have people talk about it a lot, especially with the annual trips that we host. Many people have this false perception of Africa, and they're like, I don't understand why you would hunt that. We have elk and deer and stuff like that here. And it's like, well, in the reality grand scheme of things, hunting in Africa is no different than you going out west and shooting an elk out in Wyoming, or going up to Maine and shooting a bear. Everything has its place and it has its purpose. It's all just perception.
Yep, 100%. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's, when we get the whole concept of, oh, you can hunt that in Texas, it comes down to necessity, preference, and I'm sorry, but I can't afford a $10,000, $8,000 Impala, but I can for one animal. Like I can't see paying that much for one animal. I can see paying that much for 4 or 5, but then on top of that, you're only going to Texas for a weekend. You do that in Africa, you're going for 7 days.
Yeah.
And so in all this skew of things of whether you hunt in the States or whether you're an international hunter, whatever it is, you're still, as a hunter, you're providing for conservation. You're providing, an aspect to try to help flourish a species.
Mhm.
And then on top of that, you experience, and this is whether you're in Texas, Africa, wherever, but it's all really boils down to me is the experience, is the experience and the adventure.
Yep. And Felicia, you and I have been on a ranch together where we noticed an animal that was grossly emaciated, wormy, things like that, and it was brought it up to the ranch manager, and it was one of those like, oh, it'll be fine, don't worry about it, we'll handle it when we get to it. That's not what they do in Africa.
No.
They see something that is injured or sick, and it's immediate care on site as soon as they can get to it. Not
Right.
a,
So like
it'll be fine.
for like last year when I shot a white bloodbuck.
Mhm.
When it came into the watering hole, we noticed that it had a big tumor on its chest. His horns weren't he wasn't that big. He was kind of a undersized, wasn't trophy wise, I guess you could say, or by any means, but he had a hurt back leg and he also had a hurt front leg. And anytime he would drink water, he would actually lay down to drink the water because he wouldn't do it standing up.
Mhm.
And we probably watched him, you can see on my video, we probably watched him for heck over 2 hours before finally my guy he called the owner and was like, hey, we got this, he texted him or whatever, and he goes, Adam, we'll sell this to you at third of the cost. Done. I'll take it. I'll take out a grossly infected, more than likely wasn't going to live past the winter.
Right.
And to me, that is, again, 2 things that have happened in the last 2 years: hunting that hippo and being able to actually see it firsthand, of they come and gathering the meat and gathering the hide and gathering parts of the animal and taking out an injured animal that was sick, unhealthy, not going to live much longer. And I was able to use my conservation skills and provide.
Yep.
And so that's, to me, it all comes down to, in the realistic needs, there's 3 things that I look at for hunting. It's the conservation, the experience, and the adventure.